Trinitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity, it's something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Gather the Spirit growing in all, brought by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here. We light our chalice every Sunday. The chalice is a symbol of our faith, and one of the things it represents is the commitment we bring to, yes, a little bit of magic, but the commitment we bring to leaving our daily worries and concerns and gathering together and committing to our spiritual growth. Thank you for being here this morning. We have so many things that are good that are going on here at West Shore. Please check out the West Shore Weekly in the insert in your order of service about events coming up and how you can get involved. One quick note I want to mention is that we are opening up Room 10, as a space for folks who wish to enjoy coffee hour, but in a quieter setting. So if this is you, Room 10, go to Room 10, get yourself a cup of coffee in Baker Hall, and then make your way to Room 10 to enjoy that time with a few friends. Let's now greet each other warmly. While we're doing this, children and youth will be dismissed to their classes. If you have not seen someone before, be sure to reach out to them and say hello. journey of freedom. The land we are on was once another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
Because it is, in fact, in dying that we pass on what is important of our own selves. And that's what our story this morning is about. Matthew's parting gift. Now I would like to ask you to join with me in reading responsibly the principles and purposes from our hymnal, number 594. You may choose whether you are an adult or a child. I will read all of it. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But I think you'll see why I chose it. It's a story that speaks about how flowers can change things. From the earliest days in our religious education programs, our children learn how important it is for each of us to feel at home in our surroundings.
I need some kite advice, Lucy.
You certainly do.
Well, what should I do?
5 cents, please. Water. Welcome you into the stream of love. And I give you this rose. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear West Shore. Happy birthday to you. Look at the faces around you. Isn't it a wonderful sight? Generations of families, some who span the entire 60 years of our existence. The thing that I think I would like to talk about is the fact that I was ordained here. It was the first ordination this church had ever done. So it was, they were doing it from scratch, and they did an absolutely magnificent job of it. It's everything. It's my career, it's my family, it's my community. Beyond the boundaries of our individual lives, beyond the limits of our imagination, there exists the unimaginable, the mysterious source of our being.
Do you know how powerful and precious our community is, which you build with your gifts of time and talent and treasure? Reverend Midge was ordained here. She served as a minister here for 23 years. She retired in 2003. As you can tell, that was some pretty old video. She was special. She loved this place. Even if you never knew her, even if you never met her, you must know that the community that exists now has been permanently shaped by her love and devotion. And may this spark your own. We are all going to die. What will your legacy be? The offering will be now given and gratefully received.
I'm going to do the reading, but if that's okay, I just want to say that I had the joy of knowing Reverend Squire when I first met this church in the 90s, and her light will be missed. Today's reading comes from Carl Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. It records a pivotal dream that Jung had while en route to America in 1909. Accompanying him on this trip was Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. They were together every day and analyzed each other's dreams. And this was the dream. I was in a house I did not know, which had 2 stories. It was my house. I found myself in the upper story, where there was a kind of salon furnished with fine old pieces in Rococo style. On the walls hung a number of precious old paintings. I wondered that this should be my house and thought, not bad. But then it occurred to me that I did not know what the lower floor looked like. Descending the stairs, I reached the ground floor. There, everything was much older, and I realized that this part of the house must date from about the 15th or 16th century. The furnishings were medieval. The floors were of red brick. Everywhere it was rather dark. I went from one room to another thinking, now I really must explore the whole house. I came upon a heavy door and opened it. Beyond it, I discovered a stone stairway that led down into the cellar. Descending again, I discovered layers of brick among the ordinary stone blocks and chips of brick in the mortar. As soon as I saw this, I knew that the walls dated from the Roman times. My interest by now was intense. I looked more closely at the floor. It was of stone slabs, and in one of these I discovered a ring. When I pulled it, the stone slab lifted, and again I saw a stairway of narrow stone steps leading down into the depths. These too I descended and entered a low cave cut into the rock. Thick dust lay on the floor, and in the dust were scattered bones and broken pottery, like remains of a primitive culture. I discovered 2 human skulls, obviously very old and half disintegrated. Then I awoke. What chiefly interested Freud in this dream were the 2 skulls. He returned to them repeatedly and urged me to fund a wish in connection with them. What did I think about these skulls? And whose were they? I knew perfectly well, of course, what he was driving at. That secret death wishes were concealed in the dream. I felt violent resistance to such an interpretation. I was never able to agree with Freud that the dream is a facade behind which its meaning lies hidden, a meaning already known but maliciously, so to speak, withheld from consciousness. To me, dreams are a part of nature which harbors no intention to deceive, but expresses something as best as it can, just as a plant grows or an animal seeks its food as best as it can. These forms of life, too, have no wish to deceive your eyes, but we may deceive ourselves because our eyes are short-sighted. It was plain to me that the house represented a kind of image of the psyche. The ground floor stood for the first level of the unconscious. The deeper I went, the more alien and the darker the scene became. In the cave, I discovered remains of a primitive culture, that is, the world of the primitive man within myself. A world which can scarcely be reached or illuminated by consciousness. The primitive psyche of man borders on the life of the animal soul, just as the caves of prehistoric times were usually inhabited by animals before men laid claim to them.
Let us now share from the heart. These are some of the joys and sorrows that we bring to this space this morning. And I will bring all of them into my prayers this week as I meditate and pray for all that is our life. So in the summer of 1977, I would not have recognized the name of Carl Jung, even though the major event of my life back then was premised to a significant extent on the work of one of his disciples, scholar of world mythology, Joseph Campbell. I'm talking about that great space opera, Star Wars, which over the course of 6 weeks, I would see no less than 11 times. Now, many years later, when I told my now ex-wife, Laura, about this, emphasizing how I saw that movie 11 times, she, who had seen the same movie no less than 43 times, muttered, amateur. Each time I saw Star Wars, I wanted to see more. Each time I witnessed Luke Skywalker stepping deeper and deeper onto the hero pathway, I felt something triggered within me. Some recognition that I myself was on a hero pathway too. The something within, it felt timeless, it felt meaningful, it felt powerful, quite the opposite of my actual age of 10 years. In this respect, Star Wars was like a Bible to me. I mean, I never named it as such back then, but it was. It was revealing a great sacred mystery to me. Of course, being 10 years old, I did not possess the maturity I would have needed to articulate all of this when one day, my dad, walked into our house's garage and saw me mimicking my favorite Star Wars scene. It's that scene where Luke Skywalker is practicing with his lightsaber, his face completely covered by a specialized helmet, defending himself against the laser blasts of a randomly floating metallic ball-like robot, while Obi-Wan Kenobi is coaching him, saying, "Remember," you can probably say these words with me, right? "Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. Stretch out with your feelings." Just like that. So that's exactly what I was trying to do. Except I was just blindfolded. My brother was throwing foam hockey pucks at me. And I was whipping my hockey stick this way and that to defend myself. I was stretching out with my feelings, just like Obi-Wan Kenobi said. But when Dad walked in and saw me swinging my hockey stick slash Jedi lightsaber around, and I was really close to breaking a window or 3, he shut that thing down. He cried out, "What the heck do you think you are doing?" He did not say heck. Perhaps if I had been mature enough, articulate enough, well-versed enough in Carl Jung's thought, I would have replied, "But Dad, Star Wars has activated the hero archetype in me. And I'm just trying to become more conscious of its characteristic energy so as to facilitate my individuation." I might have even quoted Carl Jung directly, saying, "Dad, just listen to what Carl Jung says. He says, your vision will become clear only when you can look inside your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." That's what Carl Jung says, Dad. Dad, I'm just trying to look inside my heart and awaken. Well, clearly that didn't happen. Okay. What did happen was shame and confusion came crashing down upon me. I was shocked back to the earth that my dad was standing upon, which was the flat earth of an ego consciousness that had been conditioned to be, as the rock group Supertramp once put it, sensible, logical, responsible, practical, dependable, clinical, intellectual, cynical, acceptable, respectable, presentable, a vegetable. Such a conscious attitude makes it very hard to be in right relationship with the dynamic unconscious. Such a conscious attitude can only be a source of misery. What the heck was I doing? I simply couldn't say. And so I stopped. And that's how it happens. That is how we start losing contact with our inner wisdom, our deeper wisdom. That's where some of the big troubles begin. Years later, by the time I had myself developed sort of a flat earth consciousness of my own, by that time, I happened to come across Carl Jung's spiritual autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And in it, I found a story that resonated with my Star Wars epiphany, I'm going to call it that. It happened when Jung was 10 years old also. It was a time when he was feeling extremely unhappy at school, feeling alienated from his schoolmates, feeling at odds with himself, spontaneously from his depths. He found himself moved to take his wooden ruler and carve a little human figure about 2 inches long onto one end of that ruler. He gave this figure a coat, a top hat, and shiny black boots. He sawed this figure off and he nestled it into the little bed that he had created inside his pencil case, nice and snug. He added to this nest a small, smooth stone from the nearby Rhine River, which he had painted to look as though it were divided into an upper half and a lower half. 10-year-old Jung intuitively felt that this stone was his stone, the little man's stone. It was all a great secret to him. Jung then very secretly took this case to the, and I quote, forbidden attic at the top of his house, forbidden because the floorboards were worm-eaten and rotten, and hid it with great satisfaction on one of the beams under the roof, because no one must ever see it. And in those days when difficulties would arise, whenever he was feeling bad, his thoughts would go to that carefully bedded small man with his coat and his top hat and his shiny black boots and his painted stone. It brought comfort to him. It brought stability to him. In his memoirs, Jung says that he did all of this without any self-consciousness whatsoever. No one burst in on the scene like Dad did with me to demand that he explain himself. He also says that he soon forgot about ever doing this. There was a point where that carefully bedded small man nestled in his little pencil case was just simply left behind, forgotten, until 25 years later, when Jung was doing research that would eventually become his book, Psychology of the Unconscious. And through his research, he encountered accounts of soul stones found in Arlesheim, Germany, which looked exactly like his stone, painted so that they were divided into an upper half and a lower half. Soul stones like this had also been found half a world away among the Aboriginal tribes in Australia. And as for that small man he carved, Jung's research led him to findings from ancient Greece, where people would carve images of the god Telesphorus, the god who helped people recover from injury, whose characteristic look involved a coat and a hat and little shiny boots, just like Jung's own carven little man. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Spontaneously, his 10-year-old self had accessed the same deep currents of instinct that ancient peoples had themselves accessed. This is when, for the first time, Jung developed the idea that at bottom, far below ego consciousness and below personal memories that have become unconscious, there is something deeper, a larger life, not personal, but collective, ancient wisdom, millions of years in the making upon which we build our lives here and now. This must have been the source he was tapping into as a child of 10 when he did what he did. This insight had been building and building for Jung for a while, but it was happening in conflict with his mentor and colleague, Sigmund Freud, the famous Freud. In 1907, they would both be sailing to America, to a university where, through a series of lectures, they would shine as the new stars of a new movement in psychology called psychoanalysis. At the time, Freud considered Jung to be his intellectual heir and successor, the one to whom he would eventually hand over his life's work. Yet even then, on the boat to America, Jung found himself balking at certain things, especially Freud's theory that the unconscious is nothing but a buildup of all the things repressed by consciousness, denied by consciousness as inappropriate, decried by consciousness as immoral, demonized by consciousness as shameful. Really, it's like a secular version of Christianity's concept of original sin. Yes, Jung recalls Freud saying, "So it is, and that is just a curse of fate against which humans are powerless to contend." But Jung would never agree with such pessimism about what drives the human spirit or keeps it in bondage. For Jung, the focus is not original sin, it is original blessing. As he once said, in every human lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care, attention, and education. Life, Jung believed, has a spiritual purpose that cannot be reduced to something morbid, and it is deeper than repressed drives. It is deeper than the judgmentalism which drives social conditioning. It is an eternal child carrying the wisdom of the ages, which is fundamentally healthy. And it will take us to our healing and wholeness if we learn how to follow Obi-Wan Kenobi's advice and to stretch out with our feelings, to listen. By the time Jung published The Psychology of the Unconscious, the split between him and Freud was irreversible. From 1912 on, he'd have to blaze his own new way. And it's what he did. One of his major contributions was to name the reality of the deeper wisdom within all of us, the archetypes of the collective unconscious. But by now you probably have the impression, which is correct, that the collective unconscious is ancient. But what are those archetype thingies anyhow? What are those things? Those archetype things which the collective unconscious is supposed to hold. Well, in a nutshell, whatever it is, whatever else the archetypes are, they serve as a refutation to the idea that people are born as blank slates, without any innate wisdom within them. An archetype is a pattern recognition dynamic, hardwired into the mind, that when triggered, releases a full-blown sequence of behavior. Let me say that again. An archetype is a pattern recognition dynamic hardwired into the mind that when triggered releases a full-blown sequence of behavior. It's very much like what people who have raised ducks or geese know all too well. They know that if you happen to be seen as the first moving object by newborn chicks, okay, they will start following you around as if you are their mother. Did you know that? Konrad Lorenz, the ethologist, made that famous many years ago. It's just because newborn chicks are not born empty. They are born full of a pattern recognition dynamic, which is triggered by the very first moving object they happen to see. Once triggered, the resulting behavior is to imprint upon that moving object, mother, their mother, the meaning of mother, and then to act as if that were so. And that is what an archetype is, how it works. They are products of experience and evolution. They are encoded in our DNA as built-in expectations and patterns of response. They are waiting for the proper sign stimuli to be triggered. And they are meant to equip us for successful adaptation to the ups and downs of human existence. So now I want to go back to my story from 1977 when I was 10 years old. Now I can explain what was happening in more precise Jungian terms. The movie Star Wars proved to be the sign stimuli that would trigger an ancient pattern recognition dynamic hardwired into me, the hero archetype, which, well, is also what inspired George Lucas to write the movie to begin with. And it is but one of many archetypes. There's also the persona archetype, the shadow archetype, the anima and animus archetypes, the self archetype. And then there are archetypal figures like mother, father, child, God, goddess, wise woman, wise man. Events can be archetypal also, like milestones of life, birth, death, courting, sacred unions. Some objects can be archetypal as well. Stone, water, sun, moon, snake, cross, chalice. All are archetypes, all are sign stimuli that trigger a characteristic response in us, and they populate our dreams. They surround us in popular culture. They are the characters in our favorite stories. Over and over again, the storylines of the archetypes, they play out, and we can never get enough of them. Yet Jung also discovered that a prime source of misery in human life is how our archetypal potentials have been triggered in incomplete ways, in ways that are distorted, in ways that are perhaps unsatisfactory. One example of this comes from the Jungian analyst Anthony Stevens. Take, he says, the case of a woman whose childhood had been dominated by a tyrannical father who always insisted on having his own way, and he made terrifying scenes whenever he didn't. The father archetype was activated by this monster, but only partially. Only the authoritarian and abusive parts of the father archetype ended up being built into the fabric of this woman's personal orientation in life. But as for the loving aspects, the protective aspects, those were not activated, and they remained in the collective unconscious as unactivated potential. The result, continues Anthony Stevens, was that throughout her life, this woman seemed to be fated to be drawn into the orbit of bullying, self-righteous men whom she felt she had no alternative to placate, appease, and obey. But at the same time, there persisted in her an unfulfilled longing for the men who would do nothing of that stuff, but on the contrary would offer love and caring and support and protection. And unfortunately, she could just never seem to find that kind man. For she could just never seem to get into a relationship with that kind of person, because he was too alien, too unfamiliar to her, and she did not possess the emotional vocabulary necessary to share such love. Can you relate? Please don't raise your hand. But can you relate? I mean, have you ever found yourself drawn repeatedly to the exactly wrong kind of person, who over and over again continues to be destructive, but you just can't seem to do anything different than that? The path to healing for this woman, from a Jungian perspective, is to become more conscious of the unhealthy pattern that she found herself living, seeing it at arm's length, realizing that although it really does feel like fate, though it really does feel inescapable, it doesn't have to be that way, because she has within her everything she needs for her fulfillment. Parts of the father archetype in her remain unactivated, the loving parts, the protective parts, and they're just waiting to be triggered. They come to her in her dreams. They call out to her from kind men in books and movies and TV. The task before her is to learn how to find them within, learning how to weave them within, into her emotional makeup to become whole, so that she might have that fuller vocabulary with which to connect with men outside of her who happen to be kind and protective. Now, you may not be able to personally relate to this woman's story, but can you relate to her problem of imbalance? This is where the suffering comes from. And Jung was earnest in his belief that there is a drive in all of us to heal all of the imbalances. He would call it the archetype of the self. Again, this is the something that is deep within us, deeper than ego consciousness. And it is a center of clarity. It is a center of compassion. It is a center of courage and spaciousness and presence and all such good things. Some folks call it the inner light. Some folks call it Shakti energy. Whatever the language, it's within us all. It is deeper than the ego, and it knows the way to healing and growth. It knows the way to your healing and growth. I want to leave you with one more story of an imbalance in process of being healed, which introduces yet another concept for which Jung has become famous, albeit highly controversial. The story is about one of his patients. She was young, she was super educated, super smart, also super unhappy, feeling super dull, feeling exhausted all the time. And nothing Jung seemed to be doing was helping. He couldn't get past, it seems. He just couldn't get past her intellectual defensiveness until one day, when she came in and shared a dream about being given a golden scarab beetle. Okay? Now, while she was telling him about this dream of this golden scarab beetle, he happened to be sitting with his back to a closed window. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him, like a gentle tapping. He turned around and he saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from just outside. He opened the window, he caught the creature in the air as it flew in. To his astonishment, it was the nearest thing to a golden scarab beetle that one could find where they lived. Jung then presented it to his patient. Here is your scarab beetle. Her inner world had somehow been answered by the outer world. Dream and reality somehow rhymed in that moment. It proved to be the exact sort of thing that this young woman needed to get past her rationalistic defenses and to become more open to healing. And that is the story. Now, I will never forget when I first heard this story and the chills it sent down my spine. Jung calls it synchronicity. It's when happenings in your mind and heart meaningfully coincide with happenings outside of your body, happenings in the physical world. And you get the unforgettable feeling that the interdependent web of all existence is something meaningfully woven, not just randomly thrown together. For example, you may be worrying about something in your life, something you want more than anything, but it seems impossible. So you happen to be repeating to yourself over and over this quote that says, Aerodynamically, the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly, but the bumblebee doesn't know, so it just goes on flying anyway. You keep on repeating that to yourself. And let's say you happen to be walking out of a store while your mind is just repeating that quote as you're carrying your worry. And it is in that exact moment that when two bumblebees just dart straight at you, they grab your attention, they buzz around each other as if in a dance, and then they fly off. Synchronicity. Jungian writer Robert Moss says, "The greatest crisis of our lives is a crisis of imagination." We get stuck. We bind ourselves to the wheel of repetition because we refuse to reimagine our situation. That is what he says. If Jung is anything, he is an inspirer of reimagining what psychological and spiritual health mean, and also the basic way in which our world works. Oh yeah, not original sin, but original blessing. The something deep within, which unceasingly drives us towards wholeness. That inner something, which somehow works in tandem with the outer somethings of our physical universe as synchronicities that get our attention and redirect our pathways. Oh yeah. For me, way back in 1977, it was the image of the Force in Star Wars. So much more compelling than the angry, judgmental God I grew up with. "Remember," said Obi-Wan Kenobi in the movie. And I felt like he was speaking it right to me as I was sitting there in the dark movie theater eating popcorn and Twizzlers. I felt like he was saying it right to me. He was saying, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. Stretch out with your feelings. So I stretched out. I stretched out with my feelings. It is what Jung would have all of us do. Stretch out with our feelings. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Let us say our extinguishing the chalice words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.
Walk on shores while spirits fly.
Reach out. It's gone crazy. Reach out with your feelings. Reach out with your feelings. Reach out with your feelings. Who looks outside of them dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Oh yeah, you gotta turn around.